And tensions are intensifying in the Baltic Sea region as Russia and NATO conduct parallel military exercises.
This strange, odd thing just turned up on the monitor.
Something unsettling is beginning to surface from the depths of the Baltic Sea. Nearly 300 feet down, an object lies frozen in darkness. And what a new AI scan just revealed is alarming researchers across the globe. Since the day it was first detected, the Baltic Sea Anomaly has fueled theories of advanced technology, ancient ruins, and possibilities far more unnerving. So why has official interest suddenly gone silent? Why did the original investigation collapse without explanation? And now, why is an AI system insisting that this object cannot be naturally formed? This is one of the strangest underwater discoveries ever documented. And today, we're diving into what the machine intelligence may have just uncovered lurking below. What AI scan uncovers. As interest in the Baltic Sea anomaly continues to grow, new questions have surfaced about what modern technology might reveal, especially when it's not filtered through human perception. In recent years, online speculation has emerged around the idea that AI-assisted tools have been used to reanalyze sonar data of the anomaly. Could an artificial intelligence model, trained to recognize underwater formations, actually interpret the structure differently than a human? Some believe it already has. According to circulating rumors, an advanced imaging algorithm may have processed high-resolution sonar data and flagged aspects of the anomaly as inconsistent with typical natural formations. What features might have triggered such a reaction? Claims range from angular ridges and radial symmetry to geometric grooves that resemble machined patterns, the kind not usually found in geological formations shaped by water or ice. One particularly persistent detail involves a shallow circular depression at the center of the anomaly, said to resemble a sealed hatch or port. Could that be coincidence? Or is it a feature with real structure and intention behind it? Some claim the algorithm made connections between this and blueprints of known marine vehicles or submerged infrastructure, identifying similarities with panel seams, vent shapes, or pressure hatches. But without public data or confirmed sources, it all remains speculation. Another discussion point involves subtle thermal variations. Reports have surfaced online suggesting that AI thermal mapping might have detected faint heat gradients around the object, slight, but enough to raise questions. At 300 feet below sea level, the seafloor should be thermally stable. So, what could explain any energy variation? Could this imply residual power? An internal mechanism once active? Or is it nothing more than sonar interference misread as heat? Skeptics caution against drawing too many conclusions. I can detect patterns, but it doesn't always understand them. It may see familiar shapes where none exist, especially in incomplete or noisy datasets. Those more cautious about the claims argue that glacial geology is full of surprises, and that what some interpret as construction could easily be the result of ice movement, natural fracturing, or pressure-based rock shaping. But others argue that this is exactly why AI matters in the discussion. It doesn't suffer from pareidolia, the human tendency to see familiar forms in randomness. If a pattern recognition system trained on thousands of shipwrecks, natural reefs, and seafloor anomalies can't classify this object confidently, what does that suggest? Of course, many of these claims haven't been verified. It's unclear who ran the AI scans, what data they used, or what tools were involved. There's no way to confirm if any such analysis has taken place beyond scattered reports and anonymous commentary in niche forums. But that ambiguity only adds to the mystique, because if this analysis happened quietly, what else might have been discovered? Is the anomaly simply a bizarre quirk of nature? A unique glacial formation shaped just right to confuse sonar and divers alike? Or is it something more deliberate, something designed? The speculation continues to grow, especially as more people look back at the original scans and wonder, why does this thing look engineered? And why does it seem to resist every attempt at simple explanation? Whatever the truth may be, one thing remains consistent. The deeper the technology digs, the stranger this object becomes. And this isn't the first time the Baltic Sea Anomaly defied explanation. Because when it was first discovered, something even stranger happened underwater. The day electronics went dead. When the Ocean X team made their first close approach to the Baltic Sea Anomaly in 2011, they weren't chasing myths or hunting for legends. Their mission was straightforward: find sunken shipwrecks, especially the old cases of vintage champagne rumored to be resting under the Baltic waters. But instead of bottles and treasure, they stumbled into something that made their equipment, and even their nerves, start falling apart. Around 300 feet down, as their ship hovered over the odd sonar reading, the crew prepared to lower cameras and communication gear. But almost instantly, everything started acting strange. First, the sonar screen filled with static. Then, the satellite phone suddenly went dead. Seconds later, their GPS readings spun into nonsense. Their underwater lights flickered, sputtered, and finally shut off. Cameras powered down. Systems restarted themselves without anyone touching them. It felt like they had entered a bubble of electromagnetic interference, a zone where technology simply refused to cooperate. The team realized quickly that this wasn't random. Within a 200-meter circle around the anomaly, electronics stopped responding. Move outside that invisible boundary, and everything worked again. It wasn't a glitch. It was distance-based. The closer they got, the worse it became. Even seasoned marine explorers don't get shaken easily. These were experts who had worked in harsh, unpredictable environments with gear built to survive deep-sea pressure and unexpected conditions. But this time, they had no explanation. Every attempt to record or measure the anomaly with standard tools failed. Video feeds dropped out again and again. Drones froze mid-mission. One camera managed to capture a few minutes of footage before its screen went black, and later its memory card was found completely corrupted. Skeptics stepped in with theories, maybe magnetic rocks, or natural metal deposits, or even some kind of volcanic interference. But every theory fell apart. The Baltic isn't volcanically active. The seafloor in that area doesn't match regions with strong magnetic fields. And Swedish military records show no leftover Cold War devices, mines, or signal jamming experiments in that location. People online began comparing the odd disruption to reports from places like the Bermuda Triangle, or even parts of Siberia's Tunguska region, areas long associated with strange compass problems, sudden signal loss, and disappearing aircraft. Soon, the term electronic dead zone started spreading across forums. Yet no one could explain why such a zone would exist in a calm, stable part of the Baltic Sea. Stranger still were the quiet, personal reactions from the divers. Although none of it was officially documented, members of the Ocean X team admitted privately that they felt an unsettling sense of tension when they got too close to the anomaly. One diver said it felt like moving through heavy silence. Another, speaking anonymously, said it felt like being inside a room that was too aware. But the most chilling comment came from a crew member who later said, "It felt like something was watching from inside it. Not alive, but awake." Of course, feelings like that can be difficult to measure. Stress, low oxygen, and deep sea pressure can easily play tricks on the mind. But when those sensations are paired with electronics failing, navigation going haywire, and equipment breaking again and again, the whole situation becomes far more disturbing. None of the footage from the first dive was ever released in full. The few images that reached the public showed blurry shapes, dark edges, and murky shadows. But those technical flaws weren't due to bad planning. They were caused by something no one could explain. The interference didn't just disrupt equipment, it disrupted the story itself. Even after that first expedition, the team couldn't fully agree on what they thought they saw or what they believed they felt. The only thing everyone agreed on was this: something down there didn't want to be recorded. And even with all the strange signals and broken gear, the Ocean X team wasn't ready to give up. They were determined to get closer, to investigate again. They weren't done with the anomaly, but the failing electronics were only the beginning. Because the anomaly didn't just look strange, it looked like it had been built. Shapes that shouldn't exist underwater. It doesn't look like it belongs on the ocean floor. When the first sonar images of the Baltic Sea Anomaly were released in 2011, even the most skeptical viewers had to pause and look twice. At first glance, it appeared to be a perfectly shaped disk, nearly 200 feet wide, with smooth curves, sharp edges, and a level of symmetry that suggested design, not erosion. Without any explanation, most people assumed it had to be fake, maybe a movie prop, a digital edit, or a clever sci-fi hoax. But it wasn't fiction. It was a real sonar reading, captured during a deep-sea mission by professional explorers using military-grade equipment. What they found didn't match the shape of a natural ridge, a reef, or a random pile of rock. It looked like a craft. One of the most unsettling comparisons came from people who noticed how much it resembled the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. And it wasn't just a quick visual coincidence. The object had a central dome, outward-reaching shapes, and even what looked like a long trench or runway stretching behind it, almost as though something massive had crashed, slid across the seafloor, and finally stopped. This scar on the bottom of the sea was hundreds of feet long and pointed unmistakably to the disk. The object didn't simply sit there. It had arrived. But that was just the start. When Ocean X returned for a follow-up dive, the team managed to get close enough to collect samples and record limited footage before their equipment started failing once again. What they did capture challenged every basic expectation of what natural underwater formations should look like. They found grooves, long, even lines etched across the surface, with angles that were almost suspiciously precise. Some areas looked like steps, stacked like a giant, worn staircase. Other sections showed straight ridges, similar to the size and alignment of pipes or fitted panels. In one part of the structure, divers reported something that looked eerily like a carved hatch, a circular indentation with edges that resembled the outline of former clamps or fastening mechanisms. Skeptics immediately insisted it was all natural. Some geologists argued that glacial movement might possibly carve strange shapes. Rock dragged under tons of ice could crack, scrape, or fracture into unusual patterns. But not everyone agreed. Many thought the features looked far more like construction than coincidence. One aerospace engineer, who reviewed the footage independently, made a striking claim. "It doesn't look like it eroded over time. It looks like it survived something." Then came the samples. Among the recovered materials were pieces of dark, scorched basalt, rock normally created by volcanic activity. But this basalt didn't behave like typical seabed rock. It showed signs of thermal fusion, as if it had melted and cooled under extreme heat. Even stranger, embedded inside one sample were traces of a metallic substance not found in the surrounding sediment. the Ocean X team described the fragment as unnatural in composition and suspected it belonged to a larger metallic framework or structural component. Yet there's no volcanic activity in that region of the Baltic, no underwater vents, no lava flows, and yet here was a burned material fused with metal, found within a disc-shaped structure at the end of what looked like a crash path. If this wasn't from some kind of craft, then what could it possibly be? Geologists continued to insist unusual formations sometimes happen. They said it was odd, but still within the boundaries of geological chance. But as the photos, grooves, and material analysis spread online, more and more researchers and independent analysts weren't convinced. Too many elements pointed toward deliberate design. And once the footage and raw sonar files began quietly disappearing from public archives, suspicion exploded. Because just as the world started demanding answers, everything went silent. Public interest hit its peak. Then, suddenly, collapsed. Updates from Ocean X slowed down. Planned missions were postponed without explanation. Because the truth didn't simply sink, it was buried. And it wasn't buried by nature. It was buried by silence. The sudden silence from above. For a brief moment, the world turned its attention toward the depths of the Baltic Sea. The discovery of the anomaly in 2011 sent a ripple through media outlets, scientific communities, and online forums alike. Headlines buzzed with phrases like sunken UFO, ancient megastructure, and the Baltic mystery no one can explain. Ocean X, the exploration team behind the discovery, found themselves at the center of global fascination. Encouraged by the overwhelming interest, the team began organizing return missions. They spoke openly about their findings. Plans for additional expeditions were announced. They even floated the idea of a public crowdfunding campaign to bypass traditional sponsors. Their mission seemed poised to evolve from fringe mystery into a serious, scientific deep dive. Then, almost overnight, everything changed. Funding evaporated. Sponsorships that had previously supported Ocean X's other ventures, including their champagne recovery expeditions, abruptly vanished. One of their primary backers, who had been with them since the early 2000s, ended their partnership with no formal explanation. Conversations that were once open and enthusiastic became awkward and brief. Emails went unanswered, calls unreturned, and just like that, the anomaly stopped making headlines. By late 2012, interviews with the Ocean X team had become infrequent and noticeably restrained. When they did appear in media, their tone had shifted. Gone was the bold confidence. In its place was a more careful, subdued language, as if they were no longer just exploring the ocean, but navigating something else entirely. Something unseen. The last full technical update on the anomaly was quietly published that year. Since then, there have only been vague mentions, hints dropped in passing, references to unresolved data, and soft suggestions that more information might be released in the future. But that future has never arrived. Speculation filled the vacuum. Some claimed the team was threatened, others believed they were bought off, or worse, discredited on purpose. In online conspiracy forums, whispers began circulating about shadow operatives, military cover-ups, and surveillance vessels spotted in the Baltic Sea weeks after the anomaly hit global news. One theory points directly to NATO. The Baltic region is geopolitically sensitive and closely monitored. If the anomaly were found to be something truly unusual, whether ancient or otherworldly, it would become a matter of national interest. Sweden, Finland, Russia, and NATO all operate in that area. Could one of them have stepped in, quietly suppressing further research? Others think it didn't require threats or interventions, just public manipulation. flood the internet with debunking articles, dismiss the discovery as glacial rock, and drown the story in memes, jokes, and sarcastic clickbait. By the time serious researchers came around, the public would already have moved on. Mystery neutralized by mockery. Yet, through it all, one thing stands out. Ocean X never retracted anything. Not once did they say, "We got it wrong." They never changed their story. Never backtracked on the claim that something profoundly strange lay beneath the Baltic Sea. And that's what makes the silence so loud. If the object had been confirmed as a rock, wouldn't that have been publicly announced? Wouldn't the skeptics have celebrated and the team admitted the truth? But that never happened. Instead, it's been over a decade of vague comments, disappearing data, and stalled expeditions. The truth wasn't disproven. It was simply quieted. And in that silence, theories began to multiply. Not wild guesses, but structured, detailed alternatives, ones that tried to explain the anomaly's design, its unnatural energy field, and the bizarre response that followed.